you.
Hi, good evening. I can't even listen. Come on. Good evening. Great. So I'm sure, a lot of you play sports here. Do you? Okay. So when it comes to cricket, what's the name which pops up first? Sachin. Badminton? Saina. Okay, okay. Boxing? Okay, okay. Chess? Full name? Yes. So, so we have Mr. Viswanathan Anand here today. So I just want to give a quick introduction to Vishy. So Vishy has been the Grandmaster of chess basically for over multiple years now. And he has also won prestigious awards like Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan, Padma Shri, and also he has won Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award. Plus, he has won Arjuna Award as well. And if I keep talking, I can spend rest maybe other 15, 20 minutes just talking about his awards. So I don't want to waste much of his time and much of your time as well. So I would like to invite Viswanathan Anand on stage, please. Vishy. Woo! Louder!
It's always embarrassing when this happens. Where's my paper? Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to take you a little bit through my chess career. I started at the age of 6. My elder brother and sister were playing, and they're much older, both more than a decade older than me. So I immediately went and pestered my mother. Can you teach me how to play chess? So my mother taught me, and this is the story of most chess players. Somebody in the family plays chess, they pass it on, and that's how it goes. And I picked it up. I guess my mother didn't know where this would go, whether I would play it for 2 days and then they'd get bored or not. But after a couple of months, they realized that something had clicked in me. So the next thing was to put me in a chess club. So I joined the chess club, and I was very, very regular. I would go there every Monday, every Thursday, and every Sunday to play chess. Sunday, more or less the whole day, so I'd finish all my homework on Saturday. And that's how I got into chess. So I would turn up often. I started competing in every tournament. They used to have all sorts of weekend tournaments in those days, and I would turn up for all of them. I was very, very enthusiastic. And soon I got my first chess book. I saw the names of some world champions mentioned. And after that, if people asked me, so what do you want to do in chess? I would immediately say world champion. And that was my answer always. And I just felt that was the natural thing. Everybody must be looking at this. Looking back, it was a very nice ambition to have. A bit naive, of course, but I became world junior champion 11 years later, and then I became world champion several times. So, and over the course of my career, of course, later on, as time went by and I got a bit older and a bit stronger, I discovered realism. So I discovered that you won't achieve everything you just think of achieving, and I started to have realistic goals and things like that. But I'm very happy that I was not realistic when I was 6. I think sometimes having wild ambition is very, very useful. Many of the sporting icons that I have, both in chess and outside, in other sports. I found that sometimes they can be almost unrealistic. But they have this ability that as soon as they achieve something, they start aiming for the next thing. And this is a fantastic quality that I admire a lot. For me, it's always been tempered with a bit of realism, but it's not a bad thing. Many years, I was the most consistent player on the circuit. So my career graph for many years was very stable. But I think encouraging yourself to have a little bit of ambition is very important. For instance, when I became World Junior Champion, that same year I became a Grandmaster. So I was the first ever World Junior Champion from Asia and the 8th Grandmaster from Asia. And thank you. And after I became a Grandmaster, for 6 months I did not manage a single result, single Grandmaster result. In other words, the first 6 months after I became a Grandmaster, if they'd been taken in isolation, I would never have gotten the title. And the problem, and many players told me this afterwards, that they struggled for a few months after becoming a Grandmaster. The problem is becoming Grandmaster is a bit like getting a doctorate or some big achievement that you've been working for many years. And you have this incredible feeling of emptiness. You're very satisfied, but what do you do today? What do you do tomorrow? You just have no idea. And it took me 6 months to snap out of it. And in a way, I snapped out of it naturally. I didn't analyze myself or tell myself how to get out of it and so on. And I always thought that's the way it goes. You have to snap out of it normally. But again, there are always a few people who, it seems they've already got 3-4 goals. I think if you're not foolish about it, it's good to have unrealistic goals. I mean, you don't achieve it, you don't achieve it. But you will not have this feeling of emptiness after getting somewhere. So you have to recalibrate your goals. It took me 6 months after I became a Grandmaster before I started thinking of the next goal. So the next goal was World Champion, actually. And that was a very long, so it took me 7 years to try for the title, and then a further 5 years, so 12 years in total before I became World Champion, after I became a Grandmaster. And those years were quite good for me because, again, as long as there was some goal which was very far ahead, I found it very easy to motivate myself, and there was never this feeling that you could tick some box off. There was still something to be achieved. When I became a World Champion for the first time in 2000, I suddenly had the same problem again. I had some recollection of how it had gone before, but this time I tried to avoid it in the beginning. So I became World Champion in December. Then in January, in May, in June, I played a couple of tournaments. I did quite well in them. But the first tournament that I played in July, which was actually the strongest one of the lot, I had my worst performance of my career until that point. And it was a bit aimless because I went into this tournament having let a lot of problems accumulate. So there were a lot of little things that were accumulating. I had this idea that I should get around to fixing them, but I was missing this urgency. So these problems started to accumulate, and then they became too much to contain. And somehow it felt at this tournament I was at my most vulnerable. But so when I got here, I started to pare back. I said, well, I'll probably have a bad tournament, but at least I'll try not to make it disastrous. And I discovered that it's very hard to do this. It's very hard to have a goal of bad is okay, disastrous is not. So that's why I think it's important, just like in a treadmill or something, you have to keep running just to stand still. And this is a problem that I've faced in new ways. I mean, every time it comes up in a new shape. So you think, now I remember what went wrong the last time, so I'll try to handle it. But life will somehow find a new way of throwing the same thing to you. So one of the solutions I told myself, and it also worked on some occasions, so it's not like every time I achieved something I had a falling off. There were times when I managed to set myself some mini goals. I would tell myself, I found the easiest to be creative goals. So I'm going to learn a new opening in chess, or I'm going to improve this part of my chess, and so on. And if you had some minor goal like that, then it became a lot easier to focus on that. And it kept your brain working, and automatically the motivation came in. So when I was young, I did not have a trainer. My training was just to go to a chess club and keep playing often. And in fact, I became a Grandmaster without any formal training as such in chess. But eventually there comes a time when you'll have to reach out and get some help. You'll need to work with people who can teach you things. I mean, you can't learn everything by experience. And when I played my candidates for the first time, I got my first trainers. Both were very close friends of mine. And that was nice for the first experience. Then my next match was actually against Karpov. So when I had to play him, I tried to get a more experienced trainer. And I found a Ukrainian, former Soviet player at that point, Gurevich. He was very, let's say, wise, old, cynical kind of player. And that was good because it led me to think about chess in many, many different ways. For instance, it had never occurred to me that somebody could approach chess so radically differently from me. But so my chess was always, this is what I want to do next. And if I do this, then this is how my opponent can respond. Very natural. And Gurevich immediately told me, and I don't know how long it would have taken me to figure this out himself. Gurevich told me something which stuck with me all my life. He said, Karpov doesn't do that, or at least he doesn't realize he's not doing it. He doesn't think, what is it I want to do next, and how will my opponent respond to my plan? He thinks, what is my opponent going to do next, and how do I stop it? Now, that's a fascinating insight, and of course, at the age of 20, I wouldn't even have known what to do. But just having that thought in my head allowed me to change my style of play a little bit. I mean, you can't suddenly do things totally differently, but I found that when I played Karpov, quite often in the middle of the game, I would suddenly ask myself, what is it I want to do? And then I would look to see if he could stop it in any way, or he could do something that's unpleasant. In other words, I started to look not for my opponent's best move, but for what my opponent thought would be the most unpleasant move for me. It's not that easy as I make it seem, but already the fact that you're aware of something helps you. So I did much better. I mean, Karpov, after all, had been world champion for 10 years. He'd been number 2 in the world for 5 when I met him. So he was still very much in his peak. And I managed to run him very close. I still lost because there were some mistakes that I needed to eliminate. But I remember that insight. And so it's very important that as you get stronger, you have to build a team. These can be a family or friends who buttress you morally and help you handle all the tension and stress. It can be trainers, and also a circle of friends. So in many, many ways, you have to build a team. And you can sort of compare this to an ecosystem, because it kept on evolving. This was the stage when computers were just entering chess. So when I played Karpov, it was 1991. And I would play my first world championship match in 95. And then second one in 98, and then I won the third one in 2000. So slowly my team began to expand. I stopped working with Gurevich because I realized he could not work in the room with me without smoking, and I couldn't work with him smoking. So it was quite sad to let him go, but anyway, I found some new trainers and started to work very well. But these were still early times. I mean, the trainers I needed now had to be slightly open to technology because instead of chess books and papers, everything was slowly moving into databases. So an early adaptation, and in fact, the kind of trainer who was good, the job description sort of slightly changed. If he was resistant to using a database, then over time he got slightly less useful as a trainer. But this adapted. Then when I played the World Championship matches, I had a team of 4 people. So this was huge. I mean, it's 4 people working with you because there's so much material to cover. And I was still only 25, but I had to think about how to break up the work, and it was impossible to follow all the work because there were 3 or 4 chessboards on the table and people going off in different directions, and how do you keep a bird's eye view while at the same time understanding all the work that's being done? So it was very interesting for me, but of course, this also was benefiting my chess a lot. I think without the first 2 experiences, I wouldn't have won the World Championship the 3rd time. But for me, the most interesting experience was a few years later. So roughly by the time I'd won the World Championship, computers had become quite strong, in the sense that a strong computer would almost certainly beat any human being. So I couldn't play against it without losing games, and this is depressing because you can't train with it easily. But you lose 10 games, it's going to affect you the way you play. But at the same time, there is this valuable information that it has, and you have to try and find it. It was still one-sided because computers could calculate very well, but they couldn't do anything long-term in the same way. So your working methods had to keep on changing. So once upon a time, our preparation was very intuitive. We'd look at a position, think of 1 or 2 plans, think of some basic ideas, and then finish it. Now, you had to start breaking up your thoughts. This is what I want to do. Let me calculate the variations, and when I run into some difficulty, let me check it with the computer, and that sort of thing. But if I'll go forward a few years, this process just kept on accelerating. So first it took a supercomputer to beat the best player. Even by 2003-04, most laptops were doing it handily. And by around 2007, there were some interesting new programs which had come out where the computer was demonstrating, or the program was demonstrating some human kind of approach. Very early days, but basically somehow they changed the way in which the computer arrived at a decision, and they started to prune a lot of variations in the initial stages of search. So it started to look to our eyes to be creative. Of course, it's not doing anything remotely creative, but to our eyes, it started to look creative. And at this point, I got a very interesting break. I qualified for the World Championship after a long break of 6 years. And then I was going to play a match against Kramnik. And at the same time, this was all happening very fast, but at the same time, a friend of mine called me and said, I've got an interesting system, which is you can work with a computer that's sitting somewhere else. So very early cloud days. And I was very hesitant, but anyway, he said, because it's running remotely, it's obviously much more powerful than your laptop. Would you like to try it? And so we did. And it all happened very fast. So in 2007, I won the World Championship on the condition that I would defend it right away in a match. And this match would happen in 2008. So I had a short window of about 7-8 months. And I had not done match work for quite some time. So I assembled a team very quickly. I had not worked with a big team for more than 10 years. And so there was some catching up to do. And what's even clearer is that it was clear that I was not going to be able to have the time to do everything perfectly. I would have to improvise a lot. But I got a very good team of both young players and 1 or 2 old friends. So this was a good thing for me. First of all, because new trends were emerging faster and faster, and I was unable to keep up. So it was important to have 3 young players in the team who were more attuned to this, so that I would be exposed to the ideas. And then have one experienced player so that I could still relate to someone. Then I got this team together. Now, before this time, I was very focused on things like secrecy. It was very important to me that whatever work I did and whatever plans I had to remain secret, that very, very few people could find out about them. And then something interesting happened. One of my young seconds, he was logging on to a chess website to play chess. And, or sometimes even just to chat. That's how young people were. So I thought this was harmless. And then a friend of mine who ran this website, he suddenly called me and said, "Is this guy on your team?" And I was shocked because I thought, how on earth did he know it? I had not mentioned this, mentioned this to very, very few people. Well, it turned out he logged onto the website from my IP address, and he saw that my IP address was the same, and he added, put 2 and 2 together. And besides that, in a few years, between my seconds informing their girlfriends and my seconds informing their friends, and I realized it's just impossible to keep secrets. The second thing is, what's the use of keeping secrets if you're using so much computer analysis? The computer is what it will show me, it will show the next guy as well. So I had to completely adapt my way of thinking. I think it's not so much secrecy which matters, it is just being nimble. You have a good idea, hopefully you can use it tomorrow, and then you forget about it and move on. You can't have this notebook which is top secret, but this was the kind of experience which brought it to me. And I think in that period, I was very successful in doing this. I got young players who were very attuned to ideas, and I realized that because they were all communicating with other people, I was getting a huge network of ideas. And this was important, because if your ideas don't last very long, and if anybody can find them with a computer, then what is important that you have lots and lots of starting points. So this ecosystem worked perfectly at this stage. And in fact, I have found this repeatedly over the years, that over the course of my career, the best ideas actually come from random places. I remember another tournament which I played in Dubai in 2014. I landed and I got there 2 days early. So suddenly I saw my friend on chat, my Spanish friend, and he turned out he had also come 2 days early. And so we agreed to meet up. And then we met up and we started playing some chess. And we were just playing casual games. But he started playing this idea which I'd never seen before. So I asked him what. He said, funny, this idea is not supposed to work, but I've been playing it for a few days, and it's not as bad as it looks. So I went back to my room, and then I thought, well, I must check this, because, it also seemed bad to me, but I couldn't refute it, so I did it. And then in that very tournament, 3 more guys had found the same idea, but I had been prepared. But if I hadn't had this casual encounter with him, I would not have been prepared. So I scored 2 very valuable points in that tournament against people who were not expecting me to be ready. But a lot of it is serendipity. So on top of the network of trainers you have, it's very important to have as many friends and people that you know who are constantly bouncing ideas off you. Especially in the times we live in, where everything is going faster. So the lifespan of ideas and the lifespan of your strategy is much shorter. Then you really need to have to be better networked or plugged in. And so I won the World Championship in 2008. And looking back, I think it's almost like I did everything perfectly. That was the best match I have played in my entire career. I've never played a match like that. So I played against Kramnik. And then in that one match, I had 75% against him at some point. And all our life, we have been more or less balanced. So it was just the best match ever for me. But after this, something new started to happen, which is, so these slightly intelligent programs were getting more and more creative, and AI technology is also just starting to enter chess. So first, these programs, what was happening was I was still working with some of my old methods, and this is a problem because sometimes you're just hardwired to work in a certain way after a while. And the youngest players who had no experience working like this were doing very new and interesting things. A lot of them were taking lines which we had discarded 15, 20 years back and using computers to revive them and using them at tournaments. So over the next 3 or 4 years, my results first trended downwards and then trended quite sharply downwards. I became aware of the problem fairly early, but it was simply very difficult to change your working methods. And another problem was as long as I was playing the World Championships, I was sitting with my team for 3 months in a row training, and we were with each other 10 hours a day. So when the World Championship finished, I lost my team. Partly because we were all sick of each other. I mean, you can be as friendly as you want, but at the end of 3 months with each other, you don't want to see each other. So, and then suddenly I realized that without them, I was becoming much worse at becoming informed about everything. So this dual effect meant that my results crashed for a while, which is, again, there was a big distinction between my match results, which were very good when I had my ecosystem, if you like, and my... But here we're talking of new working methods. They were using computers to explore all sorts of new areas, all sorts of new fashion was coming up, and I was simply not adapting myself to new working methods. Anyway, finally, after a few years, I fixed this problem to some degree. And then the first, well, like a neural chess program appeared. And this one started to change things even more. So what happened was, over your lifespan, you develop certain ideas about how chess is played. In certain positions, bishops are good. In certain positions, knights are better. In certain positions, rooks are better than bishops, etc. So you have, let's say, a basic map of what is good, what is bad. But what was happening with AI was that the valuations of everything were being rewritten. So, and the pace was getting faster and faster. So it was very disorienting because you knew something on Wednesday, and I'm not joking. On Friday, you suddenly didn't remember the points anymore, and you had to revise it again. So I found I was revising the same material over and over and over because I was unable to grasp it. But the hardest thing I found was not so much learning new stuff. I mean, learning new stuff, at least you can still get excited. You think, I never knew this, and this is fantastic. I'm going to try and use it somewhere. So I was able to cope with new ideas. What I found hardest was forgetting my old ideas. So whenever the AI engine would show something that really contradicted what I knew, that was the hardest. So when I actually ended up playing at the chessboard, some positions would look so incredibly good to me. They just felt good. And all my life, when something felt good and I played it, it generally worked. But now, I would go in for a position which I felt very good in. And then a few moves later, I would realize that I'm at C. And a little bit later, I might escape with a draw, I might not. Then you'd come back and think, how is that? How did I spoil such a good position? So I would ask my trainer, and he said, no, you never had a good position. The computer also always said you were worse. And so much harder than learning new stuff is learning new stuff that contradicts what you already know, because your intuition is something suggest you're dying to make a move, and at that point to tell yourself, no, the move I'm dying to make is wrong. It's very hard to realize that. And so nowadays, what I do to cope with this is in any position where my trainer has put a mark saying this is good for black, let's say, and it looks good to white to me, then I take it, I run the engine, but I think for myself for 5 minutes. So without the engine, I look at a chessboard. I but I have to play it out as if I'm playing a real game. If you simulate that situation, I play it several times, and then I check with the engine, what is it I missed? And then slowly you understand why your earlier intuition was wrong. But there is a payoff. At some moment, there'll be a beautiful moment when you realize exactly why the computer suggestion is good. And then you realize you've actually increased your chess understanding a bit. And this is wonderful. But I won't pretend this is an area that is solved. I'm constantly struggling against this because we're talking of a lifetime of everything that you knew. And some of what I knew is still good. So if I had a roadmap of what is not and what is, that would be easy as well. But you don't know what you're doing wrong and what is right. And the only way I can find to deal with it is by playing it in a board. So I cannot afford to lose that many games in a tournament. But I can sit at home and pretend that I'm a tournament, try it out, and slowly correct these areas. But naturally, this is very hard to do. And one of the things that's happening is that the younger generation, those who probably didn't have this backlog of things they have to forget, they adapt much faster. But in chess right now, we're dealing with a searing change that, except one or two players who really seem to have almost magical abilities to adapt, the majority of players go up and down and up and down and up and down, even in the ranking lists. You can see there are guys who are number 2 for 3 months in the world, and then they spend the next 6 months between number 7 and number 15. Then they suddenly come back, then they go down. Everyone is struggling with coping with this. And on top of that, thanks to the fact that classical chess, which is sort of like test cricket, if you like an analogy, computers are allowing you to neutralize each other very fast. The focus is shifting to the tie breaks, so to speak, to faster and faster time controls. And so now we are swimming in change. We have to learn new things all the time. Things which were true last year are no longer true because the computer's gone a bit deeper and then you have to re-understand everything. On top of that, you're forced to adapt to different time controls. And that's basically what we're doing all the time these days in chess is trying to keep up with all this change. But I think unless you have an open mind and you really force yourself to learn, and this is quite boring work a lot of the time, but it just has to be done, then what I found that even if you have a few months where you're not keeping track, your results can just fall off a cliff. So just to be competitive, you need to work incredibly hard. But it is rewarding. That's a nice thing. And there are some payoffs. I really enjoy it when I find something new about chess. And it's nice. You think after 32 years of being a Grandmaster, I can discover something that I just didn't know yesterday. And so that's kind of where I am today. So I hope you found that interesting. And I think we can take some questions now if you want. Thank you. Okay. So my rivalry with Kasparov, he was, he's 6 years older than me, and he became world champion 2 years before I became world junior champion. So in a way, he got a head start, but he was a product of the Soviet chess school, so to speak. He learned from Botvinnik, who is one of the great legends of chess. Everything was designed to help him go faster as well. Of course, his own natural talent, his ability to work was very good. But there was a group of us, about 5 or 6 juniors, all roughly the same age, the 1969-70 group. We all got into the world's top tournaments around the same time. We broke in around 91. And then we started meeting Kasparov regularly at that point. So he was quite a bit ahead of us. When we broke into the top 10, He was already world champion for 5 years. He had a huge team assembled with him. So it always seemed that he was a few steps ahead of you. I played him in my first match in '95. And funnily enough, initially I managed to neutralize him completely. So the first 8 games were drawn. And then I won the first decisive game. But my experience told, because at this stage I did not know how to adapt to this new situation. I'd gone to the match trying to think, how do I stop a guy who's more experienced than me, who's more comfortable than me in these matches? And I couldn't adapt to being in the lead. And so the very next game I lost. And then it's only after 2 more losses that I managed to kind of stabilize myself. So that was a very tough experience. And the other mistake I made was not realizing that I could not treat Kasparov as just another opponent. I understood he was stronger, but I meant that when I go to a tournament, I had to spend 1 week preparing for the other 9 players, and I had to spend 4 days on just Kasparov. You couldn't use the same material twice because he was simply playing so much better. He was a difficult opponent for me, but anyway, much later I started to get better at it. And then one day he suddenly retired. So he retired very early in 2005, and that's roughly my rivalry with Kasparov. Thanks. Anybody else? Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Hi.
See, I have a very basic question. You've been playing chess for so long. So as far as I understand, a basic chess lover, that 8 into 8, 64 blocks are there. So do you still find new moves?
I don't find new moves. I find moves that I thought were not good suddenly good. And so that's the thing. I mean, generally, you quickly form a sense of what is good and what is bad in chess. And sometimes we do this too much so that our personal preferences are so strong, we can reject entire categories of positions. Nowadays, I think the most fascinating thing I find is discovering things that I thought were not good, that in fact I did not understand them well. So we're still playing the list of openings I thought existed in chess 30 years back. I mean, 30 years we asked me what are the legal opening moves and what are the main openings you can play. There's not that much new stuff. What happens continuously is realizing that you're wrong. Or realizing that you were right, but not for the reasons you thought, that sort of thing. And that is constant. Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
As we all know that chess was invented in India, and we had so many years to find one Viswanathan Anand, and mostly it is ruled by Soviet Union. You know, why it took so long to get one Viswanathan Anand, and what's the next step to get next Viswanathan Anand?
Okay, I would say that the Soviet Union, the state started supporting chess quite systematically back in the 1920s, so shortly after the revolution. And they had this idea that chess and Olympic sports, gymnastics and things like that, and culture was an important part of showing how how a communist system encourages culture and sports to flourish because people are relieved from day-to-day work. Anyway, but what it meant was the Soviet chess players were able to be professionals. In other words, they had all their needs met, and they could focus on chess about 30 years before other countries. Then Bobby Fischer came along, and the first strong chess countries started emerging in the rest of the world, so the US, Western Europe, and things like that. But the experience was always very different. The Soviet chess players were phenomenal at training and studying chess systematically. The Westerners, because they always had to combine it with earning a living and playing chess, they had a different approach to it. In India, there was not much chess happening at that point. To the extent that it was, I was very lucky to be born in Chennai because that was the center of chess in India. What it basically means is you interact very little with strong chess players. There's not much chess culture in your country, and I think that's why there was a lag in India. But I was lucky in many ways. My school was very helpful. My parents were very supportive. I managed to spend a year in the Philippines. I had chances to travel to tournaments. So some of these things were compensated for. And I'm happy to tell you that right now there are 64 Grandmasters in India, from India. So when I was... Thank you. So I became the first Grandmaster in '87. The second Grandmaster came along in 1990. And our 64th joined us yesterday. So I think it's just a snowball effect. You know, once the first person does, then second, then it gets faster. Now, in fact, in India, it's very good because all the youngsters, they're in such a competitive environment right away that they all push each other, and coaching has improved. You know, chess is a very competitive. A lot of people are participating, and we're doing well. But to take another country, Norway, chess was non-existent till about, 15 years ago. Then suddenly Carlsen started doing well, and now it's picking up there. So you always need somebody who I think makes people realize that something exists, and then they try their hand at it, and that's how it goes.
So, you know, DeepMind has there was a game called AlphaGo, and Lee Sedol was beaten by DeepMind's algorithm on reinforcement learning. You also mentioned your experiences on chess, playing against computer, and it was very hard. So I just want to know today, what is the situation? If, as a human race, the best of the human mind can beat computers on its own? And in the future, how you think it will pan out? Because it's a debate on whether AI can really dangerous for human race.
Okay. Basically, we had brute force programs in the first stage. And generally, we stopped having any chance against these old-style computer programs. Already, I think by 2003-04, there was no more interest in man versus machine, so to speak. And these chess matches just stopped because it was humiliating. Then for a while, they tried to make computers play with handicaps. So they would have 2 pawns removed, or they would have a knight missing, or, I mean, just handicap chess. And even there, they were beating us. And then, first Alpha, I've forgotten the thing, Alpha chess, AlphaGo chess came along. AlphaGo was playing chess. And that beat the strongest brute force program about 3 years back. Then the next one came along, which was AlphaZero, which, well, so the legend goes, I'm not mocking it, but I haven't seen it. So the legend goes that they gave it the rules of chess. They told it to play against itself for 4 hours. It played 45 million games against itself. And then, based on whatever it had understood about chess in those 44 million games, it beat the previous Alpha, whatever, convincingly. I mean, by over 100 games, it won 25 games or something, or 27 games. So, I mean, that is a margin of victory so huge that there is no explanation. It's just kind of clear that it's better. And, but this was still a major company doing it. Then recently, this neural network thing arrived for PCs. So now there are some volunteers who have started a program. Everyone can download it. I'm also using it. Everyone's doing it. You can run it on your PC, but you need a very good graphics card, and you know, and now that is one of the things I was saying, that earlier the computer used to contradict refine what we did. So all the brute force engines would continually correct us, but it's like somebody pointing out mistakes in arithmetic. You don't feel that you're learning something new, you just realize, but okay, my brain was tired, I made a mistake, and so on. With the latest generation over the last 3 years, and especially this acceleration that's happening, it feels like every day something we thought was bad is turning out to be good. So right now, chess is just developing very, very fast. It's fascinating as well because 10 years ago, it was fashionable to say that chess was dying, that computers might solve it. Now we realize that we had no clue about how to play chess. And I mean, it's happening at 2 levels. So the current, these neural chess playing programs, what they're doing is they're coming up with real radically new stuff, but they're also showing that basically the human way of playing chess, which was to do a lot of long-term stuff, sacrifice material for other factors like space or initiative, was fundamentally correct, even if we didn't know all the details. Whereas the brute force programs kept on telling us that material was the most important thing. Neural networks are showing us something different. So it's a very tough time where you never have any certainty about what you know, but at the same time, it's very interesting. So just like all other fields, we feel that suddenly we've lost our orientation, that up and down and everything. It's a crazy time, but we're going with it. As for the dangers of AI, I simply don't know. But the only thing I'm certain of is that because how we do it, how humans operate, there's always one country competing against another country, one defense industry competing against another defense industry. I'm fairly confident we will not stop if it's before it's too late. So, like all arms races, this will go on. So.
Sir,
Yeah.
as you mentioned that nowadays, with the advent of the computer involvement, the long format of the game has become less, you can say less, it has become closer between the players, and the focus has shifted over the shorter formats of the game. And myself as a fan of the game and a very bad chess player, I'd like to, while watching live matches, I would like to watch like classic matches which are longer formats. In that case, and this gap will only decrease further as the years go on. In that case, how do you see the viewership of chess and the game of chess in terms of the longer formats of the game or the shorter formats of the game?
Okay, that comment might have been too categorical. So I will say there are 2 things happening. First, there are a lot of classical games which get neutralized and end in draws very shortly because the preparation is so good. But equally, and I mentioned this, that so many new things are turning up that there is, it turns out that what we thought we knew about chess and the death of chess was very premature. So you can still watch a classical tournament. And because the games are getting longer and draw offers are forbidden by mutual agreement, blunders always happen. And so classical chess, I think, will still be a big part of chess. But you have to be good in the faster formats because the tie breaks are often in the faster formats. And so you'll need to balance it out. I think for a chess fan, it's not clear that classical chess will disappear. It'll be there, but we'll have good days and bad days. You'll have days when you're sitting there for 7 hours and you don't realize the time has gone past, but you'll have days where it's over in 2 and that's it. So people are continually experimenting with new formats. But I don't see any danger to any format by itself. Over a tournament, you get enough interesting stuff. And anyway, by the end, half the guys collapse by exhaustion. So blunders happen, and you get an interesting tournament anyway. Thanks.
Hello.
Okay, I think we're out of time. Sorry. So.
Okay, sorry. One more question. So you said you were not qualified here.
Okay. Okay. Last question.
Yeah. You said you were not qualified for the World Championship for 6 years. So everyone in the whole country is looking as a role model regarding chess about you. So how did you face the outside world, and how did you handle the pressure? And even the kids of going to school, your kids will be asking something, right? So how did you handle the pressure and all?
Okay, no, I was talking of a period between 2000 when I won the title, then I lost it at the end of that year. And then I played my next World Championship in 2006. But the problem is for 3 out of those 4 years, there was no World Championship match at all. It's a long story, which I won't get into, but chess politics. And then subsequently, I've had a chance to qualify and play in many, many World Championships. As for my son, I mean, sometimes when I go to school to pick him up, he's in 3rd standard, and some of the older students will come and ask for autographs. But I mean, Akhil knows that I'm playing chess, and he knows I'm sort of a big deal in chess, but it doesn't affect him at all. So for the moment, he's very innocent, and he even plays chess at home with me sometimes, but he's just having a good time. So I don't know, maybe in a few years, it'll be something else, but right now he's just having fun with it, so no pressure. Thanks.